Hello, everyone, and thanks again, Adam, for setting up the stage for this first CAMDEA event of 2022. Today, I'm going to be presenting some musings called an AI strategist perspective on personalized food pricing. And because I'm a strategist, I like to use things that begin with the same letter, so possibilities, pitfalls, and protections. And actually, when I built out the rest of the talk, I went from purpose to possibilities, pitfalls, protections, predictions, and finally ending up with a plea. Okay, so who am I and what am I doing here today? So, AI strategist is just one of many hats that I wear, but essentially, I work with business and technical teams to ideate, evaluate, design, deliver, and recover data solutions with a specialty in AI and machine learning. What I tell stakeholders who don't quite understand what the value add is, I explain to them that it's my job to help you do your job better. So, I'm very much rooted in servant leadership and draw upon my previous experiences to inform my practice as a consultant. So I'm currently a principal consultant at Slalom. I'm also a part-time professor at Conestoga College in their School of Applied Computer Science and IT. My educational background includes a degree in psychology with a math minor from Waterloo. I'm a recent Master of Management in AI graduate from Queen's, and I've also taken some courses at WeCloud Data, in that specifically their data science and data engineering curriculum. Outside of formal education, I'm also a certified information privacy professional in Canada, which means I have a very foundational understanding in the laws and regulations which govern our privacy protections in Canada. And I've also pursued additional training in the fundamentals of OCAP, which is ownership, control, access, and possession, with the First Nations Information Governance Center, which really rounds out my privacy perspective. What I want to acknowledge is that while I'm going to be drawing on experiences and learnings that I have in my toolkit, every view that I present here is my own. This is a personal passion project, work that I'm building out in still early stage. So subjective views are definitely subject to change. So I'm presenting this now in February 2022. You might reach out to me in March and I might have a completely different perspective. This is intended for informational purposes only. And a huge disqualifier, I'm going to be talking a little bit about legal and regulatory landscape. I am not a lawyer. Like, I'm going to repeat that throughout this. So please hold back your critique and also do not take any of this as legal advice. So I mentioned that this work I'm presenting today does not have anything to do with my job, either at Slalom or Conestoga College. This is really a passion project that draws upon many of my interests, including privacy and ethics, food security, public health, consumer protection, and thinking about the future of technology. So all of this comes together to an interest that I've continued to cultivate, specifically with regard to food pricing. And I want to acknowledge that some of my early interests in mapping the landscape of food and food access came through applied projects I did at WeCloud Data, as well as during my Master's of Management at Queen's. So now let's jump into what you can expect. So my goal for the next 18 minutes is to increase your appetite for discussions around food pricing. Broadly, I would like you to consider food personalized pricing. I'm hoping that regardless if you buy into and take a bite out of food, you think more deeply about what personalized pricing is and how it impacts our day-to-day lives. I would like for you to specifically consider personalized food pricing in ways maybe you haven't thought about. Continue to think critically about your own technology initiatives. And how I'm going to get through this is I'm going to talk about personalized pricing and define what it is. I'm going to discuss some data ethics considerations. I'll briefly overview the legal and regulatory landscape, and I'm going to highlight some recent tech research, academic based, with some potential applications for real world personalized food pricing. Overall, if you leave this talk with more questions than answers, I believe I've done my job well. Again, this is a work in progress personal project. I'm not a paid researcher. This is not coming out of any client work. So I hope that this sparks some conversation and maybe influences some future work. So let's get straight on some definitions here. What is dynamic pricing? So dynamic pricing is, at a high level, the use of aggregate customer demand to influence the price based on non-personal information, such as the time of day, the weather, or the location. So a fictional example is, imagine the price you pay for pizza after a popular basketball game. So there's a lot of people, increase in demand. It makes sense that they might increase the price in order to make more money. That's common. Personalized pricing is a subset of dynamic pricing, where you're specifically using personal information about consumers in determining the price. So in addition to the aggregate customer demand and other data attributes, using personal information about target consumers. So a fictional example of this might be, again, the increase in price you pay for pizza at a basketball game. However, now it's not just based off of the number of people in the audience or the crowd after the game. It's also based on where you sat, your previous purchasing history, and also maybe perhaps your web browsing history. And I'm drawing upon this fictional example from research that I'm going to reference throughout this. So again, this is a fictional example just to clarify the differences between dynamic and personalized pricing. So here's a real world example of technology that implements things related to personalized food pricing. So the Kroger digital shelf pilot in 2019. So at a very high level, not going to get too deep into this, they basically installed a bunch of interactive shelves and sensors in pilot stores across the US. The arguments that they made, and I'm willing to accept it even though it is their marketing, is that the LEDs save printing and labor costs because now you no longer need to be printing out pieces of paper in order to change the pricing when there's continuous changes to what's on the shelves and how much they're costing. And you also do not need to pay for labor to go in and change that stuff. It allows for more rapid dynamic updates, which is beneficial for supply chain. In addition to the digital shelf pilot, there was mobile app integration. So on the right-hand side here, you can see someone scanning a QR code for some sort of discount. So with this comes targeted ads based off of consumer preferences and also customer experience mapping. So Kroger did report publicly that they were using some surveillance technology to determine, built in with its digital shelf pilot, how you were traversing through the store, and their goal was to try to minimize the time spent and improve your customer experience. And again, I'm not saying what's good or bad. I'm just setting this up as a real world example. So that's great. Like, let's think about the long-term possibilities in terms of outcomes for the public. So one big theme is that you could use discounting models to reduce waste if you know that food's about to expire or there's an oversupply. Health promotion, so you can have discounts for diet management. This is actually based off of recent research out of Europe where they targeted people who needed assistance with managing their weight and offered them personalized discounts in order to incentivize them, and they actually got beneficial results. So there is promising research and a lot of nutrition and health promotion researchers that think that if we could address some of the systemic issues with regard to food pricing through possibly personalized discounts, that could help improve health outcomes for society. And then lastly, this relates back to discounting models to reduce waste. But if you can improve your demand forecast, because either you're predicting better how people are going to purchase food based off of the future price, or maybe you're influencing that behavior, you can optimize the supply chain, which then also has positive downstream consequences potentially for climate, labor, etc. Okay, so this is like, in an ideal world, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had this well-orchestrated system that we could trust that when we're getting a promotion, it's in my personal best interest to accept that coupon that's going to be like good food for me. So those are some possibilities. So let's talk about data sources and collections very briefly. Again, this is based off of research in comparable areas in retail. So we know that some sources come directly from retailers, whether they're online or physical. I'm not going to go through all of them, but transaction history, name, address, credit card, online website behavior. There's also indirect digital characteristics that most consumers may not be aware of, such as your browser, computer, your device, even your battery level are used in some personalized pricing calculations. And then common things with regard to data sharing, such as cookies, web browsing history, social media engagement, your personal contact network, and obviously information shared from other retailers, which raises questions related to consent, potential threats, vulnerable populations who probably shouldn't be profiled and given promotions differently, and then questions about the accuracy and your right to update things as they change if you've been incorrectly profiled. So I mentioned that I'm going to talk very briefly about some recent papers with potential impact for personalized food pricing. I've intentionally simplified this for an audience who may not know the nuances of privacy engineering technology or privacy preserving tech. So for those of you who are experts in this area, please do not come at me. I've done this on purpose. And I'm also, again, I'm not getting paid for this, so I'm not doing a detailed deep dive into the research. But so paper one, price-aware graph convolution neural networks, published by Zhang 2020. So the domain for those who are unaware, is in recommendation systems. And again, high-level explanation. Previously, many recommendation models the models were built around previous purchasing history, related items, or comparable users. And for some reason, pricing wasn't necessarily included in the architecture. So what this author proposes is that now there's a new class of graphical models to include changing pricing information. So what is the potential use? Well, better recommendation systems tailored to individuals' pricing sensitivity. That includes changing food pricing and promotions. So potential application of that recent research. A second recent paper that I think will have a potential impact for personal food pricing is this interesting paper by Kortialis et al. 2020, which is FLAS, Federated Learning as a Service. So federated learning is a privacy-preserving technology. It's a popular technique that's used to decentralize machine learning to reduce privacy risk, but there are barriers to use for companies that are lacking infrastructure skills and knowledge to set up these types of systems. So what they did is they actually built a prototype federated learning as a service application. And they were able to demonstrate with a proof of concept that shared service that could easily on-ramp new users and applications in a privacy-preserving way. So again, this is very early stage, but there is a potential use that food retailers will more easily use collaborative machine learning models while preserving privacy. So this is reducing some of the threat concerns. And lastly, another recent paper I'd like to call attention to with this is privacy preserving dynamic personalized pricing with demand learning. Lots of words and lots of P's. But so differential privacy, again, is another privacy preserving technology. It's a technique for sharing aggregate information while protecting individual privacy. So I'm not getting into the math or diagrams of how that works, but one of the risks of differential privacy is that while you're able to disguise some of the information, if someone has access to it, a bad agent could still monitor it and infer personal attributes. So this paper actually provides a mathematically rigorous approach to compute and offer pricing without the risk of a bad agent determining the personal characteristics of users. So potential use case immediately from this research is now we can have a privacy preserving protection calculation that offers personalized food pricing with reduced harms. So now we're saying, oh, we know that Adam paid 99 cents for tomatoes, and now we're not gonna be able to infer why he got offered that specific price for that specific item if I'm a bad actor trying to get to understand why he would have got that discount, okay? So pitfalls, the biggest pitfall that I've come across, and this is actually motivated from the work that I did at WeCloud Data, as well as my work at Queen's, is the big confusion about who pays what, and also barriers in able to just map out where food access is in digital food environments. So according to the OECD as of 2018, their take was that there was no conclusive empirical evidence of online personalized pricing. I'm skeptical of that. And what I really believe is that what we're witnessing and what makes it difficult is that this is strategic obfuscation, okay? So what is strategic obfuscation? It's the managerial practice of pricing confusion to increase margins. So you go to the grocery store and you see the same pack of toothpaste in similar sizes and similar boxes, similar ingredients. It's hard for you to differentiate. So you just pick up whichever one you usually do without thinking critically about what you need or just going for the one that's on discount. This is by design. It's intentional to confuse consumers so that they can increase margins. And we also see the same thing in the pricing of cloud computing technology, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. So how does strategic obfuscation, according to Amanda and my personal view, potentially impact the barriers to understanding personalized food pricing? Well, think about your experience going to popular food outlets or even the grocery store. We have different loyalty problems, different online offers coming in through email. We have digital discounts. In the States, there's mobile self-checkouts. So if you have a digital checkout app, and then overall, like even before all this personalized pricing, there's price drifts. And this just creates a lot of confusion. Even if we have access to transactional data, we're maybe not getting the full picture about how those managerial decisions were being made and what personal information was used to make that. So there is an interesting study. If you're very interested, I have a list of references. I'll show up at the end, but there is a group of people that tried to unpack online food retailers, and their study approach was interesting. They basically ran a campaign of monitoring food pricing in many different areas, and they were able to detect very minor but significantly different drift that they believe is evidence of strategic obfuscation. Okay, so that's what's up. Also, I see someone's hungry. Yes, yes. Okay, okay. So mindful of time, I have about 5 or 6 minutes left. So ethical considerations. So Milano et al. 2020, they did a very sophisticated systematic literature review in order to evaluate common ethical issues with recommender systems in general. I did not do a systemic review. I just was influenced by their work, and I'm presenting here 5 ethical issues. This is not meant to be inclusive. I'll highlight 2 just in the interest of time, which would be autonomy. So again, lack of awareness of choice. And then the food pricing risk or concern specifically is, how much choice do I have in purchasing if I'm being influenced and bombarded by personal ads for food products? And health impacts such as unintended consequences and unauthorized or undesired nutritional and dietary influence. So some questions to consider when we're evaluating the implementation and strategy of AI solutions for personalized food pricing come into play from the perspective of the customer and public health of, why do food retailers influence food purchasing through pricing? Is it fair? How can healthcare professionals contribute to how pricing decisions get made, if possible? Because what if I have a disease or chronic illness and that personal information ends up being used in profiling? For example, if I have diabetes or obesity and that information ends up being used to harm me. In the pursuit of profit. Okay. So high level protections, again, huge reminder, I am not a lawyer, not legal at all. So this was influenced by a European legal analysis, and I mapped it into Canadian context for comparative and also found a few references for limitations. I'll just call out, like, in Canada, price discrimination is a criminal offense. However, according to the Ministry of Innovation and Science, and also just like general commentary that I've come across, like, personalized pricing is not against the law unless they're dominating a market. It's going to be very difficult to make a claim against using the Canadian Competition Act as a criminal offense unless it's completely outrageous. So if you have a bunch of small retailers using personalized pricing, it's not necessarily going to come to fruition with a legal protection through the Canada Competition Act. I'll jump to PIPEDA just in the interest of time. So those of you who are familiar with privacy might be aware of fair information principles, consent, limiting use and openness, and thinking, well, why can't these be used in order to help protect people from the threats of personalized food pricing? However, for those of you that also know PIPEDA, there's lacking some adequacy in the implementation and guidance. And also PIPEDA has been known to be limited in scope for individual complaints. So if myself and my sister are both shopping online, it's going to be hard for me to go and make a claim that we got personalized pricing difficulties. And let's not forget that pitfall that I was talking about strategic obfuscation. It's very hard to make the case that we actually are being targeted and personalized, which juxtaposes what the media is telling us and what retailers are telling us, that this is the way they're going to improve their margins over time. So that's like high level. I skipped a couple in the interest of time, but happy to share the slides later. So extending on their analysis, I just was brainstorming, like, what are some other regulatory approaches? Again, not a lawyer here, but there are attempts to try and protect children from junk food advertising. So if you're interested, check out the Child Health Protection Act. It didn't get passed, but it might be helpful for thinking through regulatory approaches to try and mitigate the risks to the well-being of Canadians when it comes to personalized food pricing. Perhaps there's analogies with how we enforce the tobacco industry regulations. So that's coming out of the Canada Health Act. And then also, this was new to me as I got into this research, but the National Farm Products Council, I understood that there's egg and milk and other produce marketing coalitions and production, but I didn't realize that it was actually a federally established public oversight body. So one can imagine that if those types of domains of food have public oversight, then perhaps just the pricing of food might one day too, if necessary. So let's just jump into predictions in the final few minutes of this chat. So off the top, I know many minutes ago I talked about 3 recent advances in machine learning research. The FLAS, the Federated Learning as a Service, I'm going to call it out here. There's going to be probably soon, as long as that proof of concept doesn't get outdone, you're going to see federated learning platforms that are targeted for food retailers. Like, they don't necessarily have to be specifically verticalized, but I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being someone's product offering in the near future. And then similarly, this is based off of some other research, and like a hypothesis under review that I have is like, we know that there's a lot of differences in online versus physical grocery. And so one potential thing is that there's differences in individual versus group shopping. So think about any time that you've purchased grocery or even food online, you're typically the one that's building the cart and then getting the delivery, versus if you have kids or family members or an annoying brother or whatever, they're probably not sitting beside you telling you exactly what to put in the cart. So if we followed down that line of thinking, like similar to how we have mobile apps for Canadian youth finance that just got released this year or in the last few months called Mido, maybe in some type of future, and it's up to you to decide if that's a utopia or a dystopia, you might see mobile apps for family grocery shopping coming in the near future that try to address this gap. And for those of you that love design, this is an extremely beautiful paper that I highly, highly recommend. It's not even a paper. It's like an beautiful thesis about the design for collective family experiences during online grocery shopping. So this is not just my own thinking. Other people are thinking about this too, prototyping solutions for the good of people, but also let's be mindful of what the risks are when it comes to advertising for children and profiling people. So my final plea is like, even if you don't care about food and it's 6:30 at night, is like, let's think about how we could track and evaluate food pricing with minimal effort. So this is actually a public health issue that doesn't necessarily have to do with AI, but in general, it is a difficult question to understand who pays what. And there's a lot of potential ways that we could try to solve that through regulation and technology. And then my second question is thinking through when we talk about personalized food pricing or personalized pricing or just AI in general, really questioning is opt in and opt out enough, and what the downstream consequences are for the groups of individuals who decide not to participate in whatever AI solution you're building. So my final plea is please reach out if this work is of interest to you. Again, this is a passion project. I don't have a pitch. I'm not building anything right now. I'm not selling anything. And again, if you leave this talk with more questions than answers, I've done my job well. Thank you.